are sitting at your desk and you're just staring at a screen. Like the cursor is just blinking.
Oh, the dreaded blinking cursor.
Right. It just keeps blinking, keeping this steady, almost mocking rhythm. You have this massive project due, or I don't know, perhaps it's a personal goal you've been desperately trying to reach for months.
And you just can't get there.
Exactly. Instead of feeling that crisp, energized focus you need, you feel this thick, impenetrable wall of brain fog. Your breathing is shallow. Your jaw's locked.
Your patience is just razor thin at that point.
Completely razor thin.
Yes.
And your inner critic is absolutely screaming at you. It's telling you that you just need to, toughen up. That if you had any real discipline, you'd be able to push through it.
Yeah, that internal voice can be brutal.
It really is. You feel like you're failing some invisible resilience test, like everyone else around you has access to this secret reservoir of willpower that you somehow missed out on.
It is an incredibly isolating feeling. And it's a feeling that usually makes us double down on the exact behaviors that are causing the problem in the first place.
We just try to force it.
Right. We clench our jaws harder. We try to force the focus. We pour another cup of coffee. And we just end up feeling even more depleted, more brittle, and way more frustrated.
Well, welcome to another deep dive for Cortex Lab. Today, we are taking that grit your teeth meth, tearing it into tiny pieces and basically throwing it right out the window.
Good riddance.
Seriously. Because true resilience isn't about raw, punishing endurance. It's actually, it's a biological and psychological engineering problem.
Well, yes, exactly.
And to solve it, we're looking at this fascinating stack of research, primarily foundational insights from Addison Bell's work on mental training, alongside some comprehensive architectural blueprints for human optimization.
It's a really incredible synthesis of ideas.
It is. We're going to figure out how to build an unbeatable mind, and it starts with the physical hardware in your skull.
That's the critical paradigm shift we need to make right out of the gate. When people talk about mental toughness, they treat the mind like it's this ethereal, magical ghost floating in the ether.
Like it's completely divorced from the physical body.
Right. But if we look at the engineering definition of resilience, it gives us a much better framework. In structural engineering and materials science, resilience is defined as the ability of a material to absorb energy when it is deformed elastically, and then, upon unloading, to have this energy recovered.
Okay, so it's the ability to return to its original shape after taking damage.
Exactly. It requires a highly specific balance of strength and flexibility.
But the caveat there, and this is what really jumped out at me from the research, is that the material itself cannot be compromised.
Right.
I mean, you can't ask a piece of steel to be resilient if it's already rusted through,
No.
right? Or fundamentally weakened at a molecular level.
And for human beings, that physical structure is the brain and the central nervous system. You simply cannot bounce back. You cannot be emotionally flexible or mentally tough if your biological hardware is compromised.
It literally doesn't matter how much willpower you try to exert.
Not at all. A brittle material snaps.
So let's talk about what makes that hardware brittle, because the brain is an absolute energy hog, isn't it? The numbers in the source are just wild.
Staggering is the word. I mean, the human brain makes up roughly 2% of an adult's body weight. Yet at any given moment, it is consuming 20% of the body's entire energy supply.
20%. Just sitting there.
Just sitting there. And in children whose brains are actively building vast neural networks, it can consume up to 60% of their daily energy intake. The brain is an incredibly demanding organ.
So it needs constant fuel.
Constant. It requires an uninterrupted supply of resources, oxygen, glucose, water, just to maintain its resting state, let alone to function optimally when you're throwing complex, high-stress problems at it.
I want to zoom in on the water aspect, because there's a statistic in Bell's work that completely reframed how I view my own afternoon brain fog.
Ah, you're referring to the 2% rule.
Yes. Let's get into that.
So the brain and the heart are composed of roughly 73% water.
73%.
Nearly 3/4 of your most vital processing and pumping organs are just fluid. And the research shows that losing just 2% of your body water creates a massive, measurable drop in cognitive function.
Just 2%. I mean, practically speaking, what is 2%? That's just getting busy, answering a long thread of emails, and forgetting to grab a glass of water for 3 hours. It's nothing.
It feels like nothing to your conscious mind, sure. But to your physiology, it is a 4-alarm fire.
Wow.
When you drop by 2%, the blood volume in your body literally decreases. That means your blood becomes thicker, more viscous.
Oh, so it's harder to pump.
Exactly. Your heart now has to work significantly harder to pump that thicker blood up against gravity into your brain. Because the delivery system is impaired, the brain isn't getting the oxygen and nutrients it needs at the speed it needs them.
So what happens neurologically? Because we've all felt it, but what's actually breaking down in that moment?
Well, several things happen in sequence. First, you see impaired short-term memory. The hippocampus struggles to encode new information.
Right, you can't remember what you were just doing.
Yeah. Second, you see a reduced ability to focus attention, your vigilance drops. But critically, for our discussion on resilience, you experience a severe drop in emotional regulation.
Emotional regulation, that's huge.
It's everything. The prefrontal cortex, which is the logical, rational part of your brain that tells you, this email isn't a big deal. It starts to power down to conserve energy. And when the prefrontal cortex goes offline, the amygdala, your primitive threat detection center, basically takes the wheel.
Okay, that makes so much sense. I mean, trying to be mentally tough while dehydrated is like trying to run 50 high-processing apps on a smartphone that's sitting at 1% battery and then getting furious when the screen freezes.
That is the perfect analogy.
Right. You wouldn't yell at your phone to toughen up. You wouldn't say, you just need more discipline, phone. You just plug the damn thing into the wall.
Exactly. And yet we are remarkably cruel to ourselves when we experience this. We feel the emotional dysregulation caused by mild dehydration. We feel irritable. The task seems impossible, our perspective skews incredibly negative, and we interpret that biological reality as a profound moral failing.
We think, I am weak. I can't handle my job. I'm an imposter.
When the reality is your biological hardware is just flashing a low battery warning.
It completely shifts the paradigm of what it means to feel overwhelmed. Sometimes, feeling like you are failing at life is quite literally just your central nervous system begging for a glass of water.
It really is that simple sometimes.
But it's not just hydration. The biological baseline extends to sleep, and the sources go out of their way to destroy the concept of the sleep bank.
Oh, the sleep bank. That is one of the most pervasive and damaging myths in modern hustle culture.
The idea that you can catch up on the weekends.
Right. This idea that you can sleep 5 hours a night from Monday to Friday, accumulate a massive sleep debt, and then somehow pay it off by sleeping 12 hours on Saturday and Sunday.
Which I think we've all tried to do in our 20s.
Oh, of course we have. But the human body is a biological organism, not a financial institution. You cannot repay a biological deficit in a lump sum over the weekend.
Because it's a daily maintenance cycle.
Exactly. Sleep is when the brain performs its essential maintenance. During deep sleep, the glymphatic system actually opens up and flushes cerebrospinal fluid through the brain to wash away metabolic waste products.
Like taking out the trash.
Precisely. Proteins like amyloid beta that accumulate during waking hours. If you cut that cleaning cycle short by 2 or 3 hours a night, that toxic waste just builds up.
And the behavioral consequences of that buildup are terrifying. Bell's research highlights a 36% increase in critical errors when operating chronically sleep-deprived.
A 36% increase. Just think about what that means in a high-stakes environment.
It's the difference between catching a subtle flaw in a contract and legally binding your company to a disaster.
It really is. But perhaps even more detrimental to your overall resilience is the social impact of sleep deprivation.
The inability to read the room.
Yes. When you're sleep deprived, your brain's ability to accurately process facial expressions and body language severely degrades.
Really? Like you literally can't see it correctly.
You misinterpret it. You begin to misinterpret neutral or ambiguous facial expressions as actively hostile.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. If your boss looks at you with a blank expression, a rested brain thinks they are thinking about something else. A sleep-deprived brain thinks they are furious with me and I'm about to be fired. You become paranoid. You become defensive.
Which means you end up isolating yourself and pushing people away at the exact moment you most need a support system.
Yeah, exactly.
So, assuming you're listening to this and you're trapped in this erratic sleep cycle right now, how do you fix it without completely turning your life upside down? Because trying to force yourself to go to bed 3 hours earlier usually just results in staring at the ceiling and having an existential crisis.
Right, you can't force it. The biological clock, or the circadian rhythm, fiercely rebels against sudden, dramatic shifts. The recommended approach is a gentle coaxing.
Just nudging it.
Just nudging it. You adjust your sleep schedule by no more than 30 minutes a week. If you normally fall asleep at 1:00 a.m., aim for 12:30 a.m. for 7 days. Let your hormone cycles adjust.
And we have to talk about the blue light issue. We hear about screen time constantly, but the mechanical explanation in the research is fascinating. It's about the brain's transition state.
It's all about transition. The human eye contains specific receptors called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells.
That is a mouthful.
It is, but they contain a photopigment called melanopsin, which is highly sensitive to short-wavelength light, which is blue light.
Okay.
When blue light from your phone or laptop hits these receptors, it sends a direct signal to the pineal gland in the brain to immediately halt the production of melatonin.
And melatonin is the hormone that actually induces sleep.
Right. It is an evolutionary mechanism telling your brain, the sun is up, danger is present, we must be alert.
So when you are scrolling in bed, you are literally injecting a chemical wake-up signal directly into your brainstem.
You are actively fighting your own biology. The consensus is to keep blue light emitting devices away for 40 to 60 minutes before your intended sleep time. Switch to dim, warm lighting, read a physical book.
And simultaneously, monitor the caffeine.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the half-life of caffeine can be up to 6 hours. For many people,
Yeah.
right. So if you have a coffee at 4:00 p.m. to push through that afternoon slump, half of that caffeine is still actively binding to the adenosine receptors in your brain at 10:00 p.m. It's artificially blocking the chemical signals that tell you you're tired.
Exactly. It's a double whammy if you're doing screens and late caffeine. And the final pillar of this physical baseline is fuel, what you ingest. The research points heavily to the physiological pitfalls of high glycemic index, or high GI carbohydrate.
The classic sugar crash.
Yeah.
But again, it's not just that you feel tired, it's the emotional mimicking that happens, right?
This is a crucial point for mental resilience. Consuming high GI foods, white bread, sugary snacks, heavily processed foods causes an incredibly rapid spike in blood glucose.
And your body hates that.
Your body panics at this spike and releases a massive surge of insulin to pull the sugar out of your blood and into your cells. But it often overcompensates, leading to a rapid, steep crash in blood sugar.
Hypoglycemia.
Yes. And how does the body rescue you from low blood sugar? It releases cortisol and adrenaline stress hormones to force your liver to release stored glucose.
Wait, cortisol and adrenaline?
Yes.
But those are the exact same chemicals responsible for the fight or flight response.
You hit the nail on the head. So the physiological crash literally mimics the biological symptoms of a panic attack. Your heart rate flutters, your chest tightens, you feel irritable, your palms might sweat.
So picture this. You're sitting at your desk, you ate a donut or a bagel an hour ago, your blood sugar plummets, the adrenaline hits, and suddenly you feel this overwhelming, crushing anxiety about the project you're working on.
Yes.
But the anxiety isn't actually about the project. It's just your body reacting to the insulin crash.
You are interpreting a basic biological fluctuation as a severe psychological crisis. You think the project is doomed when really you just ate the wrong fuel.
That is mind-blowing.
The solution is substituting those high GI foods with low GI alternatives. Complex carbohydrates, fiber-rich vegetables, healthy fats that provide a slow, steady, highly regulated release of energy that keeps your blood sugar and therefore your mood completely stable.
Okay, so that establishes the foundation. Before you ever question your character, before you ever doubt your mental toughness, audit your biological baseline. Give your brain the water, the sleep, and the slow-burning fuel it requires.
Build the strong material first.
Right, but let's transition, because biology is only half the battle.
Yeah.
Let's say you're perfectly hydrated, you slept 8 hours, you ate a beautiful kale salad, and then a massive project at work completely falls apart. You fail. Your biology is optimized, but your psychology crashes. How do we prevent the internal system from shattering?
This moves us from physical resilience to psychological reframing, and it brings us back to the flexibility aspect of that engineering definition we discussed earlier.
The elastic deformation part.
Exactly. When we face failure or trauma, our instinct is often to harden ourselves, to build a thicker wall.
To put on the emotional armor.
But rigid armor is dangerous. If a force is strong enough to break rigid armor, the armor shatters into pieces. And to explain the alternative, the research introduces a profound philosophical framework from Japan, the art of kintsugi.
I am absolutely obsessed with this concept. For anyone listening who hasn't heard of it, kintsugi is the traditional Japanese art of repairing shattered pottery. But the process is completely counterintuitive to how we usually fix things in the West.
Right. It's very different.
Normally, if we drop a favorite bowl,
Yeah.
we use clear superglue. We painstakingly try to fit the pieces perfectly back together so that the cracks are invisible. The goal is to hide the damage and pretend the break never happened.
It's an illusion of perfection.
Exactly. But the kintsugi artist does the exact opposite. They repair the broken pieces using a special lacquer that is actually mixed with powdered gold, silver, or platinum.
The philosophy behind this is just breathtaking. When you use gold to fill the cracks, you are making the damage highly visible. You are illuminating the fracture.
You're highlighting it.
Yes. Because in doing so, you are acknowledging that the break and the subsequent repair are a vital part of the object's history. Because no two objects ever shatter in the exact same way, those glowing golden veins end up highlighting the object's unique journey.
It's beautiful.
The bowl is not just repaired, it is elevated. It is considered more beautiful and more valuable because it has been broken.
If we take that metaphor and apply it to our own psychology, it completely rewrites the script on failure.
It really does. It shows us that true mental resilience is not about pretending you don't feel pain. It is not about remaining an unblemished, perfect vessel.
Right.
When you experience a brutal failure, a devastating breakup, a career setback, or intense anxiety, you don't use clear glue. You don't try to hide the dent and pretend you're fine. You use the gold of self-reflection, of new knowledge, of hard-won experience to fill those psychological cracks.
It's a shift from fragility to anti-fragility, and it requires us to abandon the idea of just being stubborn. Sometimes people think resilience is just being a river flowing around a rock or being a mammoth just ramming your head against an immovable wall until it breaks.
That's a brilliant distinction. Ramming the wall is rigidity. If you are a rigid object and you hit an immovable force, you shatter. And if your philosophy is to hide the cracks, you stay shattered because the shame of being broken prevents you from growing.
And this connects intimately to the friction between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset, right?
Yes, very closely.
Let's unpack the mechanics of that.
Yeah.
Most people have heard those terms, but why is it so biologically and psychologically difficult to maintain a growth mindset? Why is our default setting usually the fixed mindset?
It comes down to evolutionary energy conservation and threat detection. A fixed mindset operates on the subconscious belief that your intelligence, your character, and your capabilities are static, finite traits.
You're just born with it, or you aren't.
Right. You are dealt a hand at birth, and that's it. In this framework, your primary goal in life is to constantly prove that you are smart or capable and to fiercely avoid any situation that might prove otherwise.
Because in a fixed mindset, failure isn't just something that happens to you. It defines you. If you fail a math test, you aren't a person who struggled with a concept. You are stupid.
Yes, the failure is an identity-level threat. And the amygdala, the brain's alarm system, treats identity threats as physical survival threats.
Oh, wow. Like being chased by a lion.
Exactly. Thousands of years ago, if you were deemed incompetent by your tribe, you were exiled, which basically meant death. So the brain naturally gravitates toward the fixed mindset because avoiding challenges feels safe. It saves energy. It protects your status.
But the kintsugi approach requires the growth mindset.
A growth mindset views your core traits as highly plastic and fluid. Your current intelligence and talent are just the starting point. They can be developed through friction, effort, and failure.
So failure becomes data.
In a growth mindset, a challenge isn't a threat to your survival. It's an opportunity to stretch your neural pathways. Failure isn't a reflection of your worth. It is simply raw data. It is the gold dust you need to mix the lacquer.
Okay, I have to jump in here because understanding kintsugi conceptually is beautiful. We can all sit here calmly and agree that failure is a learning opportunity.
Sure.
But how do we actually bridge the gap between theory and reality? When the plate drops, when you get the phone call that the deal fell through, or you realize you made a massive public mistake,
Yeah.
the heart rate spikes. The cortisol floods your system. The shame feels physically hot.
It's overwhelming.
In that exact moment, how do we stop the panic and start mixing the gold?
That is the ultimate test of mental training. And to answer it, the research warns against what is called the total victory attack plan.
The total victory plan, the idea that we can eventually train ourselves to never feel anxiety at all.
Precisely. Many high achievers secretly harbor the belief that if they just meditate enough or read enough books, they will reach this Zen-like state where they are immune to fear, worry, or self-doubt.
They just want to turn it off completely.
They want total, permanent victory over negative emotions. But biologically, this is impossible. The fight-or-flight response is hardwired into your nervous system. Trying to eliminate fear is like trying to eliminate your sense of touch. It's a vital mechanism that keeps you from walking into traffic.
So the goal isn't to stop the initial spike of panic.
Not at all. The goal is to change your relationship with the panic. When the cortisol hits, The resilient mind doesn't say, oh no, I'm afraid I must be weak, I failed my mental training.
Right.
The resilient mind acknowledges the physiological reaction and says, my body is preparing me for a high-stakes event. You view the negative emotion not as a stop sign, but as a stepping stone. You convert the energy of the panic into the momentum required for the repair.
There's a classic historical example of this reframing that Addison Bell highlights Thomas Edison and the light bulb.
Ah, yes. It's perhaps the most famous articulation of the kintsugi mindset in Western science. The story goes that a reporter asked Edison how it felt to have failed 1,000 times while trying to invent a commercially viable incandescent light bulb.
And the reporter's question is rooted completely in the fixed mindset. Like, you failed 1,000 times. You must feel like an imposter. You must be deeply ashamed of all these broken pieces of glass and burned out filaments.
But Edison's response is the epitome of the growth mindset. He reportedly said, I didn't fail 1,000 times. The light bulb was an invention with 1,000 steps.
1,000 steps.
He genuinely did not view the shattered filaments as flaws. He viewed them as the process of elimination. Every single design that didn't work was a crack filled with the gold of new empirical data. It narrowed the field of possibility until the only thing left was the solution.
I think that is such a vital reframing for you to internalize as you listen to this. Whatever past psychological dents, embarrassing failures, or shattered projects you are carrying around with you right now, they are not permanent disqualifications from success.
Absolutely not.
They are hard-won diplomas from the School of Hard Knocks. They're your golden cracks.
And if you can acknowledge them, rather than expending massive amounts of psychological energy trying to hide them, you build authentic confidence. You don't fear the future breaking you, because you know exactly how to put yourself back together.
But applying the gold of kintsugi requires us to actually change our daily actions. We have to change how we behave. Which brings us to a major roadblock if we know what to do. Why is it so incredibly hard to just stop doing the things that self-sabotage us? Why can't we just quit the bad habits?
Because of how the brain automates behavior to conserve energy. And this introduces a massive psychological pitfall that people fall into every single January when they set resolutions, the trap of abstinence.
The idea that you can just use raw willpower to abstain from a behavior. I'm just not going to eat junk food anymore. I'm just not going to look at my phone when I wake up.
Yes, the sheer white-knuckling application of discipline. And neurologically, it almost always fails.
Why is that?
To understand why, we have to look at the mechanics of the habit loop, which operates primarily in the basal ganglia, a very deep, primitive part of the brain. A habit consists of a cue, a craving, a response, and a reward.
Okay, let's break those down.
So the cue is the environmental or emotional trigger. It could be a time of day, walking into a specific room, or an emotional state like feeling overwhelmed at work.
Right.
The brain encounters the cue and immediately experiences a craving for the reward it has historically received in this situation. To get the reward, it initiates the response to behavior.
So if the cue is feeling stressed at 3:00 p.m., the historical response might be eat a sugary donut, and the reward is a brief dopamine hit and a distraction from the stress.
Exactly. Now, if you try to use the trap of abstinence, here's what happens. You experience the cue, you feel the stress, your brain is practically screaming for the response.
Give me the donut.
Exactly. But you are using your prefrontal cortex, your finite reservoir of conscious willpower, to build a dam and block the behavior. You are saying, no donut, but you are offering the brain nothing in return. You are just leaving a void.
And nature abhors a vacuum.
Precisely. Willpower is highly susceptible to ego depletion. If you are stressed, tired, or emotionally drained, the prefrontal cortex tires out, the dam breaks, and the basal ganglia defaults to the ingrained response. You cannot simply use willpower to not do a habit, because the brain still requires a release valve for the stress cue.
I love that. You can't just build a dam to stop a rushing river. The water will eventually rise and destroy the dam. You have to dig a new trench alongside it and divert the water.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. The neurological equivalent of digging a new trench is habit substitution.
Okay, habit substitution.
You must keep the existing cue because you usually can't avoid the 3:00 p.m. stressor or the feeling of getting into bed, but you attach a new response that aligns with your long-term values while still providing a somewhat similar reward or release.
Let's use the late-night phone scrolling example from the research because I think 90% of the population struggles with this.
Oh, easily. It's a classic modern habit loop. The cue is the physical act of getting into bed and turning off the main lights. The craving is a desire to wind down, disconnect from the anxieties of the day, and be entertained.
Right.
The historical response is pulling out the smartphone and doom scrolling through social media. The reward is a sense of passive engagement and distraction.
But the side effect of that reward is that you are blasting your retinas with blue light, suppressing your melatonin, and probably reading something that spikes your cortisol, completely ruining your biological baseline.
Right. So the abstinence approach is getting into bed, putting the phone in another room, and just staring at the ceiling, fighting the intense craving to look at a screen.
Which is miserable.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
The habit substitution approach recognizes that the cue getting into bed and the craving needing distraction to wind down are entirely valid. You just need a better tool. So the new response is pulling out a physical book.
And the research actually suggests making it something highly engaging. Don't try to read a dense textbook on quantum physics when you are trying to wind down.
No, definitely not.
Read a thriller, a sci-fi novel, a romance, something that provides that narrative dopamine hit, that completely absorbs your attention, but without the blue light and the infinite algorithmic scroll. You are diverting the water into a healthy trench.
You are satisfying the biological craving with a tool that serves your long-term goals. But here's the friction point digging. That new trench takes time. The soil of your brain, your neuroplasticity, has resistance.
It's not overnight.
No. The research notes that it takes an average of 66 days of repetition for a new behavior to become fully automatic.
66 days. That's over 2 months of conscious effort. That requires serious patience.
It does. Which is why the critical insight here is that consistency beats intensity. When building a new habit, you are relying on Hebb's law neurons that fire together, wire together.
Right, strengthening the connection.
Every time you perform the new response, you are slightly thickening the myelin sheath around that neural pathway, making the signal travel faster and easier the next time.
And the research suggests you don't need a 100% success rate to achieve this. A roughly 60% success rate over those 66 days is enough to build the automaticity.
Yes, roughly 60%.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here. I want to push back on this 60% rule. Because if I am trying to quit a destructive habit, say smoking or chronically procrastinating on my taxes, a 60% success rate means I'm still failing almost half the week.
It sounds counterproductive, yes.
Doesn't that just keep the old neural pathway alive? Doesn't that just keep the craving fed? How is 60% acceptable?
It's a very valid pushback, and we have to draw a distinction here between acute chemical addictions and behavioral habits. If you are dealing with a severe chemical dependency, like nicotine or alcohol, you often do require absolute abstinence to starve the physical receptors.
Okay, that makes sense.
But for behavioral habits like doom scrolling or stress eating or hitting the snooze button, the brain is remarkably forgiving.
How so?
Think of it like walking through a dense forest. The old bad habit is a paved superhighway. The new good habit is a tiny, overgrown dirt path.
Okay.
If you walk down the dirt path 4 days a week, which is your 60% success, you are stomping down the weeds, packing the dirt, making the path clearer. If you slip up and take the paved highway 3 days a week, the dirt path doesn't instantly vanish.
The work you did is still there.
Exactly. The progress you made stomping down the weeds is still there. Over 66 days, the dirt path becomes paved, and because you are neglecting the old highway more often than not, it begins to crack and overgrow. The neurological term for this is synaptic pruning. The brain literally dismantles the unused connections.
So the message isn't try to fail 40% of the time. The message is if you slip up on a Tuesday, the habit is not ruined, the progress is banked, just get back on the path on Wednesday.
Exactly. And this is so important because it addresses the reality of motivation. Motivation is a highly volatile emotion. On day 1 of a new habit, motivation is high. On day 14, when it's raining, you slept poorly, and you are stressed, motivation is 0.
It's completely gone.
The beauty of the 66-day process is that habits are energy-saving tools. During those first 2 months, you need to expend willpower to dig the trench. But once automaticity is reached, the behavior shifts to the basal ganglia. You no longer need motivation.
It just runs on autopilot. You don't have to psych yourself up to brush your teeth in the morning. You just do it.
And because the good habit is running on autopilot, it preserves your precious, finite prefrontal cortex energy for real emergencies, for genuine problem solving. It builds a floor beneath you so that on your absolute worst, most exhausted days, your default baseline is still pushing you forward.
Which perfectly sets us up for the big, terrifying problems. We've optimized our biology, we understand kintsugi, we've automated our daily habits. But what happens when you are faced with a massive high-stakes project that makes you want to hide under the covers?
The big ones.
Right, the kind of project where your automated habits can't save you.
Yeah.
How do we conquer deep, paralyzing procrastination?
Procrastination is perhaps the greatest drain on human potential. And to conquer it, we have to recognize that procrastination is almost never a time management problem. It is an emotion management problem.
Emotion management.
Specifically, it is a framing problem. The research uses a brilliant case study from the Harvard Business Review to illustrate this, the elevator problem.
I love this story. Okay, let's lay it out. Imagine a landlord who owns a massive multi-story office building, and he's a major crisis. The tenants are constantly complaining that the elevator is far too slow. They are furious, they are threatening to break their leases, and it's becoming a massive financial liability.
A total nightmare for the landlord.
Right. The landlord brings in engineering consultants, and they realize that upgrading the elevator mechanism, buying a new, faster motor, replacing the shafts is astronomically expensive. You would bankrupt the building.
Right. So let's look at how the problem is initially framed. The problem is stated as, the elevator is mechanically too slow. We need a faster elevator. Framed this way, the solution is entirely unaffordable. It is an insurmountable obstacle. If the landlord stays locked in this frame, he loses the building.
But the landlord steps back and reframes the problem entirely. He realizes the actual problem isn't the objective mechanical speed of the elevator. The problem is the user experience. The problem is that waiting is incredibly boring.
It is a phenomenal shift in perspective. He didn't ask, how do I make the elevator faster? He asked, how do I make the wait feel shorter? And once he asked the right question, the solution became cheap, easy, and highly effective.
He installed full-length mirrors in all the lobby areas next to the elevator doors, and he piped in some soft, pleasant music.
And the complaints vanished overnight. Why? Because human beings love looking at themselves.
We really do.
They adjust their ties, they check their hair, they discreetly look at the people around them. The music provided a soothing auditory distraction. The elevator did not move 1 millisecond faster. The mechanical reality remained identical. But by reframing the problem from a mechanical issue to a psychological one, he solved the crisis completely.
I have to push back on this, though, because on the surface, this sounds like a corporate trick.
Yeah.
Isn't this just dodging the real problem? The elevator is still objectively slow.
Yeah.
If you just put up mirrors instead of fixing a failing product, eventually people will realize the product is bad. How does this not just become an excuse for lowering our standards and avoiding the hard work of actual improvement?
It's a fair critique, absolutely, but it misses the core lesson. Reframing is not about ignoring reality or applying a cheap Band-Aid. Reframing is about accurately diagnosing where the actual friction lies.
Finding the real fiction.
Yes. In the elevator scenario, the friction wasn't the transit time, it was the psychological discomfort of the tenants. If the transit time was truly the core issue, say, it took 30 minutes to get to the second floor. Mirrors wouldn't help. The tenants would still leave.
Okay.
But because the delay was only a few minutes, the friction was entirely psychological. Reframing allows you to stop attacking the wrong enemy.
And how does this connect to our own procrastination?
Because when we procrastinate on a major task, we are almost always framing the task incorrectly. We think of procrastination as laziness. We tell ourselves, I just have poor time management, I lack discipline.
Blame our character again.
Right, but that is the wrong frame. Procrastination is a fear response. It is substituting a highly important, intimidating task with a trivial, familiar one because the important task threatens our ego.
We frame the task as a massive defining judgment on our competence. If I write this report and it's bad, my boss will realize I'm a fraud, my career will stall, and I will be ruined.
Exactly. You have framed writing a simple report as a life or death survival threat. Naturally, the brain says, let's avoid the survival threat. Let's go reorganize our email inbox. Let's clean the kitchen.
We just retreat.
We retreat to trivial tasks to regain a sense of control and competence.
But this avoidance comes with a massive cognitive penalty. The research points out that it takes the brain an average of 20 minutes to fully refocus and re-enter a state of flow after a single distraction.
It is devastating to your productivity. The brain operates using two main networks for attention. The default mode network, which is active when your mind is wandering or focused internally, and the task positive network, which engages when you are actively solving a problem.
Right.
Switching between these networks is highly energetically taxing. If you look at your phone for 30 seconds out of anxiety, you disengage the task positive network. It will take 20 minutes of sustained effort to get it fully online again.
So if you interrupt yourself 3 times in an hour because you're scared of the project, you haven't just lost a few minutes. You have functionally destroyed the entire hour of cognitive output.
To stop this cycle, we have to reframe the fear of failure, just like the landlord reframed the elevator problem. We have to realize the problem isn't that the project is too hard. The problem is I am paralyzed by vague anxiety.
And the sources provide a highly specific, almost counterintuitive technique for dismantling this vague anxiety. The worst-case scenario exercise, or what some call anti-goal setting.
It's so effective.
I found this technique to be absolute genius. Walk us through it.
So when you are frozen by a task, the anxiety lives in the right hemisphere of your brain and your amygdala. It is diffuse, emotional, and catastrophic. The first step is to force that anxiety into the left hemisphere, the logical linguistic center.
Putting words to it.
Yes. You do this by defining the worst-case scenario objectively on paper, not the emotional worst case, but factual material consequences. What resources will actually be lost? Will you actually be fired, or will you just have an uncomfortable meeting?
Often, just writing it down reveals that the monster in the closet is actually just a shadow.
But then you take it a step further. You ask yourself, how could I deliberately achieve this worst-case scenario?
You literally write a step-by-step how-to guide for total, unmitigated failure.
Yes. If your fear is bombing a keynote presentation, you sit down and write the exact action plan to ensure you bomb it. Step 1, I will refuse to research the topic. Step 2, I will get incredibly drunk the night before. Step 3, I will show up 30 minutes late wearing pajamas.
Step 4, I will actively insult the front row of the audience.
Step 5, I will refuse to answer any questions.
It sounds totally absurd, but what is the psychological mechanism at work here? Why does this kill procrastination?
It robs the fear of its power by making it concrete. When you write out the exact steps required to manifest the worst-case scenario, you suddenly realize how much active, deliberate effort it would take to actually fail that badly.
Right. You have to try to fail.
You look at the list and realize, well, I already bought a suit, I've already done 3 hours of research, and I'm not going to insult the audience. You realize you are already miles away from the worst-case scenario. It turns the terrifying unknown into a highly manageable checklist of what not to do.
The anxiety evaporates because you realize failure isn't going to just randomly strike you like lightning. Failure is a process, and you are actively choosing not to follow that process.
Precisely. And once the fear is neutralized, you can use scheduling to build momentum. The research strongly advises tackling these high-friction tasks during your peak thinking hours.
When you have the most energy.
For early risers, this is usually mid-morning, right after the sleep inertia wears off, when your prefrontal cortex has the highest level of glucose available.
Don't try to conquer your most terrifying project at 4:00 p.m. when your biological baseline is crashing.
Never. And utilize the psychology of dopamine through micro goals. Dopamine isn't just a reward chemical, it is a motivation molecule. It releases when you anticipate achieving a goal and when you complete a step toward it.
Okay, so breaking it down.
If you frame the task as finish the 50-page report, the goal is too far away to trigger dopamine. You feel overwhelmed.
So you shrink the frame.
You set a micro goal. I will spend 20 minutes outlining the headers for Chapter 1. The barrier to entry is so low that the fear doesn't trigger. You complete the outline, you get a micro hit of dopamine, and that chemical momentum propels you into the next 20 minutes.
So I want to challenge you, listening to this right now. Think about the one task you are actively avoiding today. The email you won't send, the tough conversation you keep putting off, the blank spreadsheet you won't open.
We all have one.
Ask yourself, is it really an insurmountable mountain? Or are you just looking at the wrong problem? Are you trapped in the mechanical frame when you should be looking at the psychological frame? Try the anti-goal exercise. Write down exactly how to fail at it and see how quickly the fear dissipates.
It's a profound shift from being a passive victim of the workload to being the architect of your own workflow.
Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. We've built our internal resilience. We optimized the biological hardware. We embraced the kintsugi mindset. We rewired our habit loops, and we reframed our fears. But human beings are not closed systems. We do not exist in a vacuum.
We need other people.
Right. The final pillar of an unbeatable mind is the architecture of connection and assertiveness, how we interact with the world around us.
This cannot be overstated. Mental toughness is an internal state, but it is sustained by external architecture. The sources frame the necessity of connection by referencing the survivalist rule of threes.
We've all heard variations of this in wilderness survival contexts.
Mm.
You can survive roughly 3 minutes without oxygen.
3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. But the survivalist rule adds a final, incredibly poignant metric: you can survive roughly 3 months without love, connection, or human contact before profound psychological and physical deterioration sets in.
3 months. That places social isolation on the exact same biological continuum as dehydration and starvation.
Because evolutionarily it is. For prehistoric humans, separation from the tribe meant exposure to predators and an inability to gather food. Social isolation triggers the exact same stress pathways in the brain as physical pain.
It hurts to be alone.
Connection is not a luxury. It is a biological imperative. It is one of the foundational 7 C's of resilience outlined in the research alongside competence, confidence, character, contribution, coping, and control. Without connection, the other 6 pillars eventually collapse under their own weight.
But building meaningful connection isn't just about showing up to networking events or going to parties. It's about how we navigate relationships, specifically when we are vulnerable, when we are under stress, and when we need help.
Yes, the day-to-day interactions.
And one of the most toxic, self-sabotaging things we do, according to the research, is how we apologize for needing that help.
Yes. There is a profound, almost reflexive tendency in professional and personal environments to grovel when we need assistance. We walk up to a colleague and say, "I am so sorry to bother you. I know you're incredibly busy. This is probably a really stupid question, but could you maybe help me with this?"
I am incredibly guilty of this.
Yeah.
I do it constantly because I feel like I'm imposing. I'm trying to be polite.
It comes from a place of politeness and a desire to soften the interruption. But psychologically, it is deeply counterproductive. When you heavily apologize for asking for help, you are doing 2 negative things simultaneously.
What's that first one?
First, you are belittling your own needs. You are signaling to yourself and the other person that your work, your confusion, or your project is trivial and bothersome.
You are adopting a lower status position right out of the gate.
Exactly. But secondly, and perhaps more importantly, you are actively robbing the other person of the psychological satisfaction of helping you. Human beings are inherently pro-social. We get a neurochemical reward, the helper's high, fueled by oxytocin when we utilize our skills to solve a meaningful problem for the tribe.
Oh, wow. So if you frame your request as a trivial, annoying bother, you strip away the meaning. They don't get to be the hero solving a crucial problem. They just feel like they're swatting a mosquito.
Precisely. The alternative is to utilize what the research calls the 3 S's of assertiveness. Keep your request short, simple, and specific. You state what you need clearly and plainly, completely eliminating the preamble of guilt and apology.
And there is a brilliant communication tactic embedded in this. When you ask for the favor, the goal is to specifically state why their unique skills or experience make them the absolute perfect person to help you.
Yes. Instead of apologizing, you say, "I am coming to you specifically because your ability to forecast data trends is the best in our department, and I need that exact expertise to untangle this spreadsheet."
It strokes their ego, but it does it in a genuine, factual, evidence-based way. It builds deep mutual trust because you are validating their competence while confidently addressing your own need. You are treating them as a valued peer, not an annoyed superior.
It transforms what could be a burden into a collaborative, high-status opportunity. But this level of assertiveness also has to extend to how we handle the inevitable friction and conflict in our relationships. The sources delve deeply into the mechanics of language during disagreements.
Right, specifically the neurological difference between I statements and you statements.
Yes.
This is a classic concept in conflict resolution, but it is so vital to revisit because we instantly forget it the moment our blood pressure rises. Explain the difference for us.
A you statement is inherently accusatory and historical. You always give me too much work, you never listen to my ideas, you drop the ball on this project.
Right.
When a human being hears a sentence that starts with the word you followed by a negative action, their amygdala instantly triggers the fight or flight response. The brain perceives a direct personal attack.
And the moment defensiveness kicks in, learning and listening just shut down completely.
Completely. The conversation is no longer about balancing the workload or fixing the project. It is a primal battle for character preservation. They will immediately begin marshaling evidence to prove why you are wrong and they are right.
But an I statement bypasses the amygdala.
Yes. An I statement keeps the focus strictly on your internal subjective experience and the shared logistical problem. I am feeling completely overwhelmed with this current schedule. I am struggling to keep up with these deadlines, and I need to figure out a better workflow.
It completely disarms the defensiveness because you aren't attacking their character, you are simply reporting your reality. They can't argue with your feelings. It invites them to step to your side of the table and look at the schedule as a shared problem to solve together, rather than defending themselves against your attack.
It changes the entire geometry of the conversation.
But I want to explore the darker side of this,
Yeah.
because using I statements and being assertive assumes the other person operates in good faith. How do we deal with people who aren't interested in solving the problem? The people who are actively cynical, who want to tear you down, who constantly lob negativity at your kintsugi bowl. How does a resilient mind handle bad faith actors?
The architecture of an unbeatable mind requires a highly efficient filter for external feedback. You must learn to ruthlessly evaluate whether criticism is actionable.
Define actionable in this context.
Actionable criticism is feedback that focuses on a specific behavior, a specific process, or a specific metric, and implies a clear path for improvement. If a colleague reviews your presentation and says, "Your argument in Section 3 lacks statistical support," you need to incorporate the Q2 market data to make it convincing. That is actionable criticism.
It might sting your ego momentarily, but it is a gift. You know exactly what to do with it. It helps you grow.
But what if they just lean back in their chair and say, "This presentation is weak. It just doesn't work for me"?
Yeah, what then?
That is the crucial distinction. If someone breaks down your work or your character without offering a solution, without identifying a specific correctable flaw, it is not criticism. It is a complaint.
A complaint.
And psychologically, chronic complaining is often a reflection of the speaker's own lack of control, their own insecurities, or their desire to assert dominance by diminishing others.
So it says everything about them and nothing about your presentation.
The expert advice from the literature is incredibly liberating. You are free to assertively, comfortably ignore non-actionable complaints. You do not have to internalize them. You do not have to defend against them. You simply let them pass by.
You don't have to absorb every single piece of negativity thrown your way. You can let the non-actionable toxicity bounce right off the kintsugi gold.
Precisely, because your resilience is no longer dependent on the erratic, often projected opinions of others. Your resilience is built on a solid foundation.
And what a foundation we've built today. Let's bring this all together because we've covered a massive amount of ground in this deep dive.
We really have.
We started with the physical machine, dismantling the myth of raw willpower. We learned that mental toughness is biologically impossible. If you don't respect the hardware, the brain needs hydration to prevent amygdala hijacking, it needs sleep to clear metabolic waste, and it needs low GI fuel to prevent cortisol spikes.
And once the biology is secured, we learn how to reframe inevitable failures. We abandon the rigid, fragile mammoth in favor of kintsugi, choosing to view our mistakes not as permanent character flaws, but as the golden lacquer that makes us stronger and more adaptable.
We took that mindset into our daily actions, recognizing that the trap of abstinence and sheer discipline always fails. Instead, we use habit substitution, digging new neurological trenches and relying on 66 days of consistent, imperfect effort to build automaticity, saving our willpower for the big battles.
And for those big battles, we learn to counter procrastination by reframing the fear. Just like the elevator problem, we look for the psychological friction, not just the mechanical problem. We use anti-goal setting to make our worst-case scenarios tangible and manageable.
And finally, we surrounded that internal architecture with the scaffolding of connection. We learned to respect the biological imperative of community, to ask for help without groveling, to disarm conflict using I statements, and to ruthlessly filter out non-actionable complaints. It truly is a comprehensive blueprint for thriving.
It requires effort to build, but once the architecture is in place, it sustains you.
So, as promised at the top of the show, we want to leave you with one clear, highly specific, beginner-friendly action you can take to start building this architecture today, right now. Literally the moment this audio ends.
We call it the 2% hydration snap.
The moment you take your headphones off or turn off your car, I want you to walk to the kitchen and drink one full glass of fresh water. Do not wait until you are thirsty. Do not wait until the brain fog sets in or you feel irritable. It is the absolute fastest, easiest way to increase your blood volume, lower your resting stress response, and give your biological machine the literal fluid it needs to maintain emotional regulation.
Beyond the physiological benefit, it is a small, immediate promise kept to yourself. And keeping small promises to yourself is the fundamental building block of self-trust, which is the core of resilience.
But before you go get that water, we want to leave you with one final provocative thought, something to mull over as you go about your week.
Think about the kintsugi metaphor and think about the habit loops we discussed.
Yeah.
What if the personal flaw, the failure, or the crack in your history that you have been most ashamed of your entire life is actually the exact biological or psychological cue you need to trigger your greatest success?
Wow.
What if your deepest vulnerability isn't a permanent disqualification from the life you want, but simply a starting line, waiting for you to attach a new golden response?
What an incredible perspective shift. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive for Cortex Lab. You have the tools. You understand the engineering. You are fully equipped to build an unbeatable mind. We'll see you next time.